What are we taping this? I would have put something on that's not got a stain on it. Hold on one second.
What are you talking about?
Yes.
Oh, that's just
very
sad.
hard here.
That's just sad, Roger Bennett.
Hey, there's no way that's official NHL attire. Come on.
What are you talking about?
You will never meet another person that loves Tracy Chapman, America, and Everton Football Club more than our next guest. Now, he didn't invent podcasts, but he set the bar on how the beautiful game can be talked about. One of the Blazers that makes up the iconic duo that is Men in Blazers, and the author of a brand new book that I'm very happy to add to my collection, Gods of Soccer, the Pantheon of the 100 Greatest Soccer Players. It's Roger Bennett.
Oh,
welcome to Footy Prime.
Joy and an honour to be with you. Craig Forrest, Ipswich town legend. God, I walk a million miles to be on this show. It's a joy to be speaking to Canada. When you say I love the United States, I do love the United States, mostly because I have one simple rule in life. Whatever side Piers Morgan's on in an argument, always pick the other side. But I do want it to be clear. I adore Canada. I adore Canada with all of my heart. I grew up in Liverpool. I had an auntie who a generation before had moved to Toronto. And every time there was an election in England, I grew up in Liverpool, which was very progressive and beautiful. My dad was one of the only conservative. He was a judge, so he was fairly right-wing in his politics in an awful fashion. And every time there was an election, I'd go to bed when I was a kid and he'd say, if the Labour Party get in tomorrow, we're moving to Canada. And I'd go to bed and I would pray and kneel before I went to sleep. I'd say, please let Mrs. Thatcher get killed tomorrow. Please let Mrs. Thatcher get killed tomorrow. And it never happened. So Canada was spared from the Bennett family moving over there, but I adore that place.
Wow.
So you're on the blue half of Liverpool.
Yes. God bless the good half, fighting for the force of good, the winning half at the moment.
the force of good. Yeah. They're always a great club, though. Always love playing at Goodison Park. Terrific stadium. You know, the atmosphere there, and Duncan Ferguson coming on and smashing me around the 18-yard box.
Yeah, I watched you many times when I was a kid, just feeling somebody behind me just roll up their program and urinate down the back of my legs in the old school football style. I mean, that is Goodison Park through and through in every regard, but Godspeed. Also, Canada, can we just say from a footballing perspective, what you guys have done to grow the game across North America? When I moved here and football was barely broadcast in those days, still that period of school when in America they protested so much about how they hated soccer's for weenies. It was that show, what was it, Fox Soccer News, was it broadcast out of Winnipeg by the true greats, Jeremy St. Louis, Michelle Lissell, just so many legends that were just, in those days, no one cared about rights on American television. So somehow that tiny Canadian shoebox was able to hoover them all up and then pump out just every moment of action to a hungry audience across North America. We have a lot to thank Canada for, footballing wise.
The Fox Soccer Report out of Winnipeg. Yeah, legendary.
Who was the pundit? Just the amazing guy that they had 12 minutes with no rights, so they just kicked to him and essentially be like, Phil for 12 minutes, would you?
Yeah, Bobby McMahon.
Bobby Matt, we are all standing on the shoulder of giants. That guy, he put in shift. You can just tell there'd be someone in his ear being like, 15 minutes. We've done the Turkish League. We've done the Armenian League. We've done, oh my God, we got nothing else to put on. Go, Bobby. And Bobby was a bit like, if you see Bob Dylan now, it's great to watch him in concert, but he often forgets his lyrics and he has a young guitarist and he just nods to, who when he's forgotten the lyrics, that all along the Watchtower will just step in and start playing a guitar solo. Bobby McMahon did a lot of guitar solos and each one was just a golden crumb.
He really did. They were making him dance all the time. I mean, your gift, I think, is that you articulate football thoughts in such a magical way. Like, to me, you belong on the Mount Rushmore of things that you'd never think to say about a football thing that happened, but he did. And on that Mount Rushmore, I think I'd put Ray Hudson with Thomas Rongan and maybe Eric Cantona with you.
God, Ray Hudson belongs on the North American. I mean, I am not in that company. I just was quoted in the Guardian did a feature on Ray Hudson today, and if you've not seen it, it is brilliant. He deserves all of those plaudits. Few have done more. It's like Ray Hudson. It's like Rebecca Lowe. I put Bobby McMahon and Michelle Lascelles up there. Look, at the end of the day, all of us, this is the United States. It's also Canada. Watching the rise of the game in Canada on the men's and women's side, I want to be clear. It's just been such an ebullient joy, the parallel track of wonder to what has been going on here. And at the end of the day, I think myself with Men in Blazers and the Men in Blazers Media Network, we're just a surfer surfing a very, very large wave of football sweeping the United States and Canada in the ways I think, I've only just met some of you guys, but a way we've always dreamed. We always dreamed that Canada would love a team like they love John Herdman's 11, that Christy Sinclair would get the respect that she bloody deserves across the whole nation. That's happened. And I feel the same in the United States. When I first came here, right before the 1994 World Cup, that was meant to make football go here, the sport of the future no longer. And it wasn't an overnight success. Football didn't sweep the nation like a pogo stick or a yo-yo, but its growth has been slow and steady instead. And our podcast and our television show and our media network now that's so much bigger than just us, we're really just surfing that enormous wave. I'm like Kelly Slater, but bald.
This is what I was saying about you articulate things in a way that I feel like no one else could think of. And that's part of the brilliance, part of what I love. I tell you what, I don't envy, Raj, how hard it must have been to come to 100 players for this book. Because I look at the front too, and I wondered this when it turned up in the mail. It's like a different version in other countries, like the FIFA video game, because I think I've got like the Americas version, because I've got 2 Argentines, 2 Brazilians, and the great Mia Hamm in the middle of it.
Yes,
and I wonder, is there different covers in different places? Like, yes. How do we get so Brazil, Argentina, South America?
Did they not send you the Jonathan Davis cover? That was a big mistake. The publishers should have sent you that in every regard. There were a lot of Canadians in this book. I just want to be clear.
2 legends, yes.
It was no idle.
It wasn't hard for you to leave Craig Forrest off the list in favor of Steph Labbe?
I demanded it be 101. And I wrote the Craig Forrest entry, and then the publisher's like, got to be 100. I mean, Stephanie Labbe is, who I hope we'll talk about, is truly an inspiration in a way that transcends football. And so everybody has their, I mean, it's a ridiculous thing to do, to develop your list of the 100 greatest footballers ever to play the game. And that's the joy of football, is that ultimately it's an emotional thrill in our life. The world is full of darkness and chaos. Football is, my God, such a joy and a wonder, and it's deeply emotional, and it connects us. A World Cup is about to come. It's like an eclipse that hits the entire globe at the same time. And you feel that sense of wonder, that sense of deep, profound connection, that you're making memories along with the rest of the world in that second. And that's the emotionalism of football. So to put the 100 list together, look, it's a ridiculous act of folly. We put our list together with our staff, and I hope we get to talk about some of the strengths and the weaknesses of our list from your perspective. But that's what you do. You put your list together, and to be football people, and you do this on your show, you then defend your position with the heat of 1,000 suns. And so it's a joy to do. And we put it together because our audience in the United States is mostly 20 to 30. They've come to football, the vast majority of them, since the 2014 World Cup. And what we wanted to do was create a book, I think a beautiful book. I think it really, like the art by Nate Kitch that accompanies each entry is truly, truly stunning. And we wanted to tell the stories of the greats who many in the United States didn't see. Your Pelés, your Beckenbauers, your Cruyffs, your Mia Hamms, who came almost a generation before, and tell their stories, tell their wonders, as well as some human beings who, the glory wasn't at the Pelé level, but the human life story about empathy, about tenacity, about perseverance, all the things that are great in life. I mean, Steph Labbe, her story, when you hear it, when you appreciate it, when you see what she went through, the struggle. We think about making it as a footballer. Craig, you know this, as a goalkeeper. Once you've made it, you've made it. Oh, you're getting paid to play the game you love. But no, the mental game. And all of us, God, post-pandemic, all of us are suffering with deep, deep anxiety and mental challenges. Steph Labbe was brave enough to talk about it, to admit it, to open up about it before almost everybody did, talk about the goalkeeper's vulnerabilities, and then go again and ultimately play a key part in your nation's glory. And to me, that makes her, man, she walks in as a human being to the 100 greatest footballers of all time. And that's to me, the joy of the game.
I love the way that you managed to pick them, and not just on the basis of their stardom, but also basis of their background, their personalities, very human, and very human situations that they come under sometimes in very difficult situations. And Steph Labbe is certainly one of those. I'm glad you know so much about that. That's amazing.
Sports is also always best when it transcends sports, and it teaches us something about humanity. And I think that's ultimately the thing that's wonderful about the sport that we love, that when two teams take the field in the World Cup, their nation's histories, their nation's cultures, their nation's past, take the field alongside them, and we're really just holding up a mirror to humanity. And that's what's glancing back. I mean, to watch your team, just that joyous modern face of Canada, deliriously come together. I mean, I've watched you. Our US team has been wonderful. It's young. Our US team has also struggled at times. There's a lot of still this late in the cycle. There's a lot of challenge about who our team is actually going to be come the World Cup. I've looked at you guys up north, the thrill, the joy, the ebullience, the snowball sellies, and I just marvel at what you guys must be experiencing and the memories that you've made through this CONCACAF journey.
It's been really special, and to see that the country fall in love too. Your running joke that soccer is America's fastest growing sport since 1972. But as you said off the top, this slow and steady build, we're feeling it rapid in this country now, which is great. And it's because of players on the pitch like Alphonso Davies, of course, and Jonathan David, but it's also because of John Herdman, who, if you've not interviewed yet, I highly recommend it. And you won't have to do much work because you can just sit back. It's like a TED Talk with the guy. But you will absolutely love chatting with John Herdman if you've not done so already.
You guys are lucky. You guys are lucky to have him. You really to watch his style of leadership, to watch the detailed work, man management, the tactical work in game, the tactical adjustments, the way he's harnessed. It's really hard to do. There's so much talent, so much young talent, so much aspirational talent, and the way he forged it into a collective fist in qualifying. Really, you are. I take my hat off to you. You are the CONCACAF kings. And I the older I get, I do know that. Like, I am an Everton fan, and I know because of that I'm meant to laugh at Liverpool and their downfall. But I've also realised life is too short, honestly, to watch football with anger and hate. And again, I think it's Jurgen Klopp, who I've had the joy of interviewing every year in his Liverpool career, who's taught me that. Ultimately, he laughs about football being the most important, least important thing. And I believe, listening to Jurgen Klopp, if you don't listen to Jurgen Klopp, if you despise Jurgen Klopp or whatever, then you're missing out on life. Like, ultimately, you're missing out on joy, you're missing out on wisdom. And so I feel the same about what Canada have done on the men's and the women's side. I know they're meant to be rivals, and I know we're meant to have bants, and I'm meant to put you. I just think it's bloody great. And the older I get, the more I love all of it, and it really does thrill me. And I will be watching Canada's games in the World Cup. Obviously, not with the same. I mean, the American rise of the game is deeply personal to me. Everybody's like, who are you supporting when England play Canada? As if England play America, as if that's some kind of a hard. I'm like, oh my God, full-throatedly. I love America like Kenny Powers loves America. But I will be watching the Canadian games, and I will be watching and rooting and yearning for you.
Yeah.
Well, you're right about John Herdman. We are lucky to have him, as well as he's earned everything the hard way. Grew up in the northeast of England. You might know that. Moved to New Zealand because he couldn't get really opportunities. It's hard enough getting opportunities as former players, but there's literally a list of thousands trying to get hundreds of jobs in the UK. So he moves to New Zealand, takes a women's job, finds his way through there, does really well, comes to the Canadian system with the women. And when he moved to the men, after 10 years of knowing him, I knew that it had nothing to do with coaching women, coaching men. He knew football in and out. He knew people better than anybody I've ever known, and how to deal with them, and has a read of people and where they are mentally, physically, and getting the best out of them. So one thing we will know when they go on the pitch against Belgium, they will, as a group, think they got a chance of winning the World Cup.
And that's the key. Yeah, I made a couple of series like I made a show about the 1998 American World Cups campaign, which was just a complete and utter disaster. The show's called American Fiasco. And I interviewed a lot of US players from those days, and they'd be honest and they'd say, when we took the field against the big teams, we knew we'd lost the game before the first whistle. And I do think that's key, both for the United States men and the United States and the Canadian men in this World Cup. And I know John Herdman does it. I've spoken to the players. I've interviewed, Alphonso Davies, who came on our show at length. And that's what struck me, is how he does mentally prepare them to be. I mean, it's like Everton in the good days in the 80s, where we took the field and we felt as a collective we could smite anybody. And if you can make your players feel that, and I hope the young United States, but I do a show with Tyler Adams on a monthly basis, and he does believe that, definitely believes it with Leeds and the Jesse Marsh. And that parallel story, the John Herdman story, the Jesse Marsh story, all of these managers fighting for respect, walking lonely roads, hard work roads, unconventional roads. I can only look at what John Herdman's done. Like I look at what Jesse Marsh has done. To be honest, when I look at what what Bob Bradley did, I thought, and Harold did, I thought, I always say about Bob, I said it in Monday's show, the path he went via Egypt, to Scandinavia, to the French second division. And yes, the butt of many jokes in Swansea, but bloody hell, that guy deserved so much respect. It's hard being a pathfinder. John Herdman's a pathfinder. Jesse Marsh is now a pathfinder. And I do hope many North American coaches will follow in their steps.
You're right when you say the pathfinder. And I think the more North Americans that we can get over into Europe, it will definitely open a lot more doors for us, because it is difficult. It's very, very difficult, especially as Canadians now. And I think over the last number of years, our game's really, really growing, and everybody can see that. Now, we're still behind the Americans. We're still miles behind your development, where you guys are. But we're slowly getting there. And I think with Toronto FC winning a championship, that kind of put us on the map a little bit as well. Our men's and women's team now getting into a World Cup. We've started our own domestic league, so we're giving more opportunities to players, more opportunities to coaches. And we do have great coaches here, but it's these pathfinders that are going to help with these coaches and players eventually hit their limits and get over to Europe, where a lot of people want to go to in the end. Because that's the goal for a lot of people, is to test themselves and see how far they can go. And if you can get over to Europe like a Jesse Marsh, it's fantastic.
It takes a risk. By the way, watching Toronto FC, I do. One of my goals for post World Cup 2023, I'd love to come up and watch a game. I do. I look at that fan culture that you guys have harnessed and just built there with real, deep, true admiration and wonder. I love the city of Toronto. I adore it. It was the last place I went to before COVID. I flew up to interview Austin Matthews just the last week before COVID kicked in, and I cannot wait to get back. There is something wonderful brewing there, and the players en masse from Canada and the United States, I do think they've shattered the stigma that has existed against North American players. But that managerial step, it is the last backwater, and the managers do prefer to do the MLS path, where there's a quicker, speedy route to become a an important manager as opposed to doing an apprenticeship in Europe. Who the hell wants to live in Leipzig or these foreboding footballing cultures? There's very few North Americans who followed the Bob Bradley path, the Jesse Marsh path. It'll be fascinating to see what John Herdman does post World Cup. But there are remarkable and rich histories. I've just done this show. It just started to come out called Go Go USA with Brendan Hunt, the Ted Lasso creator, where we go through every single World Cup that the United States have ever qualified for and relive and revel in that history. And there is a remarkable history. It's a passionate history, almost a secret history. Yeah. I don't think we celebrate. The United States were semi-finalists in 1930. Why don't we talk about that more? But I feel the same about Canada, that there is a rich history, a dynamic history, a glorious history. I've got a feeling post this World Cup, the nation is going to lift it up and appreciate it more. Please, God, revel in those boys as you have in your women who are just deliriously fantastic, and the trajectory that you will then go on as we hit 2026 together. This World Cup is in the United States. The United States thinks it's just in the United States.
Of course it does.
It's going to be in Canada. It's going to be glorious. In Mexico, it's going to be incredible. It's all the better for being in all those three nations and watching the pull of that as your sponsors come in and the commercial muscle builds around the game in Canada. God, it's going to be, please God, we'll keep chatting up to 2026 together and we'll be in a very different place collectively.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's a big part of it, isn't it? Because what's good about this Canadian team is that they qualified by right. They did it with quality. Then they're, as opposed to just, we've made another World Cup because we've been gifted it. That would not be quite the same.
They've earned it.
They've earned it. And with that momentum, hopefully you're right as far as that goes, because there's great opportunities in the commercial side of things as well. When you look at what's happened with Hockey Canada, which you're well aware of, and sponsors jumping off there. Canada's national teams, women and men, are so diverse. There's hardly a player that hasn't had a parent that was born outside the country. So it's a perfect setup for sponsors. And why wouldn't they jump on board? So let's hope that perfect storm continues and we go right into 26 together with the US and Mexico, and we put on a great show.
Yeah, look, we need that as well. And I think, with the three nations coming together and growing this game, look, we're always going to end up competing against hockey, baseball, American football, all these other sports. And collectively, if we can build it and push this together, I think we can really make strides growing this game in all three nations.
I agree. All those sports you've just named, Philadelphia is just going to keep winning them all. So we need a sport to grow at which the other cities can compete. And God, funny enough, the Union may win that too. So we'll see what the story is. God, I hope it's true. I hope we're all speaking at the beginning of a really transformational time. And I just say it's a joy to be with you.
Thank you, Roger.
Post World Cup, we'll come up to Toronto, and hopefully we'll go and watch a game, watch Bob Bradley smite all comers and raise a couple of beers together.
We would absolutely love that. I've wanted this interview, Raj, more than I want Aston Villa to finish in the top 4 this season. So
and now you've done it, and you know that I'm the worst person in the world, Brendan. And you can just tick a box off. It's a joy to be with you. I love what you guys are doing. Love what you guys have always done to grow the game and to more for everybody.
Yeah, Raj, thanks so much, and all the best with the book tour, Gods of Soccer, the Pantheon of the 100 greatest soccer players. And I'm sorry that Duncan Ferguson didn't make the list. I'm sure that fight with your publishers was horrible.
Yeah, Wayne Rooney didn't make the list, which is really the one that I regret in every regard. But Volume 2, which will start off with F for Forrest, Craig bloody Forrest. I'm going to start writing that right after I get off this.
I'll take 101.